My favorite album of way back now, 2016, was an album called Grapefruit by Kiran Leonard, but it's been a hot minute since I gave this guy's music a chance, so let's see what he's up to now with Real Home.
It seems my life does right, answering you.
While Kiran's music felt a little out of time and detached culturally back in the last decade, now I hear his sound, his style echoed by a rising star like Black Country New Road. And it turns out that, yeah, they explicitly credited Kiran as an influence, which is pretty apparent in the significant overlap between their Venn diagrams as artists. You know, you got this post-punk laden progressive art rock kind of sound with a very spontaneous, a very organic energy, some violin. The windmill scene, as I've heard it called, that's a name that just the old fogey in me really rejects with every fiber. There isn't really an umbrella genre label that fits the bill for Kiran's music, you know, or does anything but minimize what he's doing. But I'm just going to make up a term right here. We're going with progressive chamber garage. And whether he's avoiding the spotlight or simply hasn't caught on, or both, he's maintained a very enigmatic quality. The dude is obscure, despite the overwhelmingly beautiful, jaw-dropping work on an album like Grapefruit, which I see as kind of this Judy Sill, heart food kind of record, even like a Nick Drake. You know, it wasn't appropriately appreciated at the time. But once, you know, the sands of time filter through the pan, you got this gold nugget just sitting there. It's hard to overstate the impact that Grapefruit had on me. It's definitely one of the most influential records of my whole 20s, and it's challenging, it takes a lot of time, but it's worth it, and it's just brilliant. And he's made a lot of music since then, but it's extremely difficult to follow, especially for someone like me who really loves and is used to the album years, you know, that as a format, the popular music canon, if you will. You know, the capital A album as an art form, the very considered, the very preconceived and intentionally structured and sequenced album. And Kiran acknowledges this chaos of his discography in a web page of all things that's really a retrospective of all his music and how it's broken up into its various strands. Very knowingly pretentious. He's got his fixed initial strand, which are, you know, the proper records. Alongside the fixed commission strand, the unfixed perform strand, and a couple others that you don't need to know. He even includes this chart and uses acronyms to describe the strands. My wife has her master's in fine arts. It's very much a graduate school kind of move. You know, I wouldn't be surprised if there was a little bit of intentional obscurity on his part. The music on Real Home, though, like Grapefruit, is a lot less academic. It's filled with spontaneity and emotion. And like Grapefruit, it's got that very rare quality of, as soon as I heard it, even though I didn't know the album a moment before, I felt like there'd be some emptiness if it didn't exist. Pass Between Houses starts things with a bang with its galloping pace and clickety-clack percussion. I love the acoustic guitar part, how he doubles it and layers it in spots to just build dynamically. With all the acoustic textures, the song darts between extremely ominous and then warm and comforting. It's an extremely dense and rich song, and just right away this album is exactly what I wanted it to be. A very testing, a very stretching listen. The next track, Theater of Change, channels some more of his amorphous freak folk stuff from Grapefruit with its loose tempo and loose poetry. You know, again, there are some extremely pleasant moments of acoustic noodling that are interrupted by a dark chord change. Experimental music, you know, just by its very nature being outside of any genre convention or cultural touch point, just forces kind of a childlike perspective where you just notice what is instead of filtering it through all these different lenses. And in a very simple childlike way, Kiran is playing here with big and little, with tension and release, with, of course, chaos and order. The title track, Real Home, is a welcome piano ballad with some gospel-like chord voicings in moments and lovely vocal harmonies, lush stacked chords. Then Treat Me Like a Stranger is this 45-second little interlude track with a great hook, a great melody, and just a nice little bluegrassy kind of style to it. It really leaves you wanting more. Before Utopia of Bog kicks in as another challenging, weaving, and winding folk rock track. The track Void Attentive is next, and it's one of my favorites on the album. It's an instrumental that really showcases Kiran's just mastery of dissonance. With these pulsing string parts, very Strokes-like, just in their insistence. The chord progression, as usual, is unusual. Again, it's very unsettling in moments, very menacing, but then it'll just switch to something totally smooth and jazzy. I love that electric piano that comes in. So good. The track My Love, Let's Take the Stage Tonight was pre-released as a single and definitely has that feel to it. It's one of the more immediately memorable moments, one of the catchier moments, one of the more tangible pieces, with this Smiths-esque swagger to it. You know, it's got those jangly guitars and a very 80s-esque vocal tone. It's a really lovely love song. You know, it's got all these swells, all these swoons that are really moving. That lyric in the chorus, if you can even call it a chorus, because it's kind of hard to tell in Kiran's music. It seems by love my life is rectified. It seems by love my life does right, answering you. Such a perfect lyric for that particular rhythm. It's so sticky. The Kiss is one of the longest tracks on the album at almost 10 minutes, and it gets a little bit more noodly with guitars and strings, which is a great feature of Kiran's music that we haven't even talked about, is his guitar playing. He's a great guitar player. He can play in a very mathy and technical style, but it always serves the song. He's very effective at making something feel intense through the strumming patterns and just the attack. Like I said, dynamics are a big strength of Kiran's music. He's able to just build up such a emotional fury, and then he just drops out into something so soft and intimate, and the Kiss really demonstrates that. It's just everything but the kitchen sink type of song. You know, you got layer after layer of frisky percussion and all these vocal harmonies, and I even hear like an electric hair clipper at some point. And then there's the closer, He Had Always Led, which pretty much works for me on every level except melodically. And I can say that about a few tracks on this album. There isn't always a hook and something memorable enough for my pop-loving brain. So after just a handful of listens to Real Home, it's not quite as melodically satisfying for me as Grapefruit. I also love some of the mathier guitar playing on that album, but it's a fascinating listen, both for my analytical, my rational mind, and my deeply animal limbic system side. The head and the heart are both given a thumbs up on this one. Plus, I like the kind of scattered song by song based themes, you know, and lyrics. I feel like I can take them just as individual songs rather than having to understand this whole narrative to really get it, which is how I felt about his last album, Western Culture. An album name that's just so pregnant with association and meaning that I felt exhausted before it even began. It's just great to be back on the Kiran Leonard train here. This is an artist I deeply respect, deeply love. I think you will as well. A solid 8 out of 10 for me. And if you like what you're hearing with Kiran, I recommend going back to Grapefruit, of course, but also Daravan Saran. I think it's from maybe a year later or two. A very different album instrumentation-wise. It's based on the piano, not the guitar. It's also based on some of his favorite books, so there's that literary element as well. A little easier to digest, but still just as weird. So, yeah. If you haven't yet, please do subscribe to the channel and like this video. And as always, thank you so much for watching.